Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this evening's webinar. We welcome you to the last in the series of our webinars presented in conjunction with the Indian Heritage Centre's recently launched special exhibition, Sikhs in Singapore, A Story Untold. This exhibition was co-created with Singapore's Sikh community and focuses on the history and culture of our Sikhs. To complement the exhibition, this series of webinars has been introducing audiences to various facets of the Sikh community's heritage from the Indian subcontinent and Singapore. Academics, experts, and collectors have been sharing lesser known aspects of the community's history through these talks, which are being held every month. This evening, we're very glad to have with us three of our very own Singaporean collectors, Manraj S. Sekhon, Jaspreet Singh, and Jaspreet Singh Narula, who will each be drawing on their own collections to share with us a little bit about their collecting journeys. And to moderate this session, we have with us Simranjeet, who has been very instrumental in bringing these collectors to our attention and to make it possible for us to actually feature these pieces in the exhibition Sikhs in Singapore, A Story Untold. Simranjeet Singh is the CEO of Gardant Health Asia, Middle East, and Africa, a cancer diagnostics company. He has 15 years of senior management experience in Asia Pacific, working with biopharma, diagnostics, and medical device companies for their R&D, business expansion, and growth strategies for the region. He also sits on the board of the Oversight Committee for the National Health Innovation under the Ministry of Health. His passion for movies has allowed him to be involved as an associate producer for a Hollywood film, Hotel Mumbai, and as an executive producer for an award-winning documentary, The Saint Soldier, the story of the first Sikh in Singapore by Manraj S. Simran is an active volunteer and a very well-known face in the Sikh community and currently serves on the Central Sikh Gurdwara Board and the Sikh Advisory Board. Simran, could I please invite you to introduce the speakers for this evening and the premise for this webinar, please? Thank you.
Sure, thank you so much, Narlina. And very happy to have all of you join us this evening for this amazing seminar on our Sikh collectors, who I know very fondly, and I'm very, very, very much interested to find out more about their collection. So today we've got three prominent Sikh collectors that will be sharing about their collection. First, we've got Manraj Singh Sekhon. Manraj was born in Singapore. His family has been here for over 4 generations. He's a portfolio manager by profession and has been in the industry for over 25 years. He has been actively collecting Sikh arts and artifacts for over 15 years. And he has a very wide collection, which he will share with us in a moment. We also have Jaspreet Singh. Jaspreet Singh started his career in Asia Projects Engineering in 2005. He started as a supervisor and now is the plant support manager for the power sector. From a very young age, he had a very keen interest in Sikh history. In 2007, he started the Gurdwara collection with the encouragement of his family. He feels that his collection has helped him to understand and bond with his roots, identity as a Sikh, and to preserve the rich Sikh heritage. He's particularly fascinated by the Sikh Empire, and there are 3 main themes in his collection: the Sikh Empire, the army, and the community. Lastly, we have a young up-and-coming collector, Jaspreet Singh Narula. Jaspreet Singh Narula is a Sikh Singaporean who runs his own jewelry company and manages his family business. Before setting up his own company, he had found his love and passion for history all the way back in his secondary school days. He would be reading about World War II, Alexander the Great Mughals, and many more. And he took an interest in his own maternal and paternal family history, on their lives in Singapore and how they contributed to the development of Singapore and the Singapore Sikh community. He started cataloging his family photos, documents, letters, and many more items that were stored away for many, many years. But now he's been able to keep them well kept and preserved for future generations. And he'll be sharing a lot about his collection his family collection, as well as other pieces that he has amassed over the years. So today, we will be able to walk through this entire different facets of Sikh history. They will be shared through the collection and then the pieces that will be shared by the various collectors. We'll start off with Sikh religious art, specifically post the Guru's times during the empire itself, and it will relate more towards religious artifacts. And then we move towards art of the Sikh Empire, and it was a period of great renaissance for the Sikh community, and there was lots of art that was being developed at that period of time, and we'll be able to see glimpses of that through the collection. Then came a very prominent part of Sikh history, where the relics of the World War I as well as World War II era will be shared. There are lots of accolades, badges, medals that sort of relate back to different Sikh regiments as well as the rich Sikh history. Then there are paraphernalia as well as photographs that talk about the Sikh police as well as army, a lot of them pertaining here to Singapore. Then we also have a very rich understanding that beyond just the uniform groups, the Sikhs also contributed in various different facets, such as business, and there will be a whole host of different aspects of historical items and photographs and letters and documents and pieces that relate towards Sikh and the business environment and their contributions to business in Singapore. And then one of my favorites, the personal histories of the different families. Many of all our collectors have deep family roots here in Singapore, and it'll be very interesting to see their journey and their family journeys through their items as well. So that's the trajectory of for this evening in terms of how we will move throughout the collection. I urge you to put in your questions in the Q&A tab right at the bottom. We will address them at the end of the presentations. I encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. It's always good to have an interactive section, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the speakers. So as I've mentioned to you, we've got the three speakers today, and we'll start off firstly with Manraj Singh Sekhon, and he will start off with at least telling us about why he started collecting, what he's collecting, and give us a little bit of context as he goes through his various pieces. Manraj, over to you.
Thank you, Simran. Very good evening to everyone. First of all, I just want to congratulate the IHC for this fantastic event, this great exhibition. I think it's been extremely well put together, and I think it's a privilege to be part of this exhibition. For those of you who've not been able to visit as yet, I would encourage you to do so. And again, I think it's been very well put together, and it's great that it's been extended to next year. So maybe starting with the collection, my collection, and why I put this together. Perhaps just going back in time, the reason for me putting this together, a number of people at IHC asked me that, Simran has asked me that as well. I haven't really reflected on it until this event, but I guess I would say I became interested in a lot of Sikh history early on with visits to India, to Punjab, to visit my paternal grandmother in the 70s and 80s. And at that time, what intrigued me most were the monuments, the forts, the old gurdwaras, and also the abundance of books which spoke about the history of obviously the Sikh religion, the Sikh community, and the empire. So that stoked my interest, and I was able to learn more about that. And then I would say, going on from that, I was very fortunate in that in the mid 80s in Singapore, there was a short-lived experiment to teach kids about their own religion and their own religious history and their own religious values. As I say, it was short-lived, so it didn't carry on for too long because of various other reasons. But we spent 2 years learning about Sikh history and Sikh values in our mid-teens. So a lot of what I knew about already became much better structured in a curriculum when we were studying what was called then Sikh studies during my O-levels. And then I would say going on from there, there were other events in the 80s. I think Blue Star was a very significant event as well, because I could see the impact it had on the community and my own family, and my father, who had a huge impact on my learning about Sikh history. So there was a lot more interest in finding out why we came to be where we were, what the history was, the origins of all of this. And then from then on, I spent quite a bit of time, a number of years in the UK. And obviously there's a huge repository of Sikh history, Sikh artifacts in the UK. So I was able to learn more about that there. So really, when I look at the collection as it is today, and I think about why I've put it together and why these individual pieces, I think a few things come to mind. One is there's no specific area of Sikh history that I focus on. I really cover the whole Sikh story as I see it, the religious history, the history of the people, the travels, empire, a whole range of subjects. I'm always attracted to things, items, artifacts that are visually appealing, and also items that speak to me, speak to my understanding of Sikh history and what I'm learning from it. So the first item we have here, if we have the map, I think this is a great example of something that really appeals to me, and one of my favorites. So I'm sure there's some map collectors on the call as well. But this is a very interesting map because it's a French map, first of all. There are very few French maps of this part of India historically. The French were present in India at this time, but obviously they had conflicts with the British and eventually left. And this map was put together by a gentleman by the name of Rigobert Bon. He was eventually the official cartographer of the French court. So he was the official cartographer under Napoleon, and he put this together. So what is interesting about this map is it's one of the first maps that actually show the presence of Sikhs and show the missals, the confederacies of Sikh minor territories prior to Maharaja Ranjit Singh putting together the Sikh Empire. So it's very unusual in that respect. So you may be able to look at it on the screen, but on the top left, you will see mentions of Sikhs spelled quite differently. And if you look across the map, there's a huge story there about the time in India this was. So this was just before Maharaja Ranjit Singh built the Sikh Empire. So it's at a very interesting point in time. And you can see there's some independent territories in the south. There's even a mention of the Jesuits having a presence in the center of India. So it's a very interesting map from that point of view. So turning to the next one. So this again is another map, but very, very different. And this is in the mid 1850s, 1860 roughly, an English map by a chap by the name of Weller. And what is interesting about this map is that this would have been at the end of this period after the fall of the Sikh Empire to the British. And this map tells a story in itself. First of all, it's obviously a very British perspective. You can see on the map that there are different areas that are colored. So you can see a red area, you can see a yellow area. So to the north is what was Kashmir or Jammu and Kashmir, which became an ally of the British under Gulab Singh. And so that was independent. And on this map, it's stated as being an independent territory. In the middle, obviously, was what was the Sikh Empire, excluding Kashmir and a few other places. And it's described as an area that was annexed by the British, which was obviously the situation it was then. At the bottom, you've got areas that are controlled by the British. So again, this is a very interesting point in time at the end of the Sikh Empire when the British had annexed Punjab, and a lot had happened before that, which we'll come to in a few minutes. So, as Simran mentioned, there are various items in this collection, religious artifacts as well. And this is a good example of it. I don't think this is a great image of it, but again, you'll be able to see it better in the exhibition. So this is a chhatri. There are various ways of describing this, but some of you will be aware that this is a symbol of divinity, of nobility, and normally it's something that's placed above the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book, in a gurdwara or any other place of worship, and it is seen as showing respect to the Granth Sahib, or the 11th Guru of the Sikhs. What's interesting about this chhatri is, if you look at the detail, you will see that it's got carvings of the 10 Gurus all seated around it, and various other beautiful aspects to it. It is silver, and this item was in the possession of the collection of a gentleman by the name of Charles Aitchison, Sir Charles Aitchison, who was the Governor General of Punjab in the late 19th century. So although we don't know for sure, I think it's reasonable to assume that he got this from a significant Sikh place of worship, and so it entered into his collection as a result of that. So again, a very interesting piece from a different era that you don't really see anymore. The next slide, please. This is again an interesting religious artifact that I got in London. As you can see, it's a brass piece with an engraving, a carving, and painting of an image of the Golden Temple. It's done on ivory, so that piece in the center is on ivory, and it's painted on. And as you can see, the shape and the visualization is as a holy book, as a holy image, and the two sides that you can see that on either left and right, that can be closed. So it's a very interesting and unusual piece, and one that you don't come across very often. And I would say, that's the interesting thing about a lot of Sikh historical art, religious art. When you think about the period from the beginning of Sikhism, from 1469, when Guru Nanak Dev Ji was born, to the point at which Sri Guru Gobind Singh died in 1708, you're talking about a period of less than 250 years. And aside from the first 100 years, that entire period was a time of oppression of Sikhs, persecution. And then subsequent to that, you had 150 years or so, of which only 50 years was the reign of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, where there was this wonderful period of wealth and pursuit of artistic endeavors that you hadn't seen before. So the period of really focusing on producing great pieces of art and religious artifacts was a very, very short one. And so a lot of these pieces are few and far between. These pieces are hard to come by. And I think this is a good example of one of those. And then over here, we have a couple of paintings, pictures, images, lithographs, hand-colored lithographs. The first one is an image of the Golden Temple. This was done by an English lady, Emily Eden, who wrote a book about her travels in the Punjab, and she did some very beautiful drawings, lithographs of that period. She published them in a book, and her brother, who she was accompanying was a governor of the Punjab, and so hence she had great access, and there were some very beautiful pictures she came up with. Similarly, this is another one. This is titled Maharaja Ranjit Singh and his Suvarni of Sikhs. So this is a collection of his hunting troop under a tree, either after a hunt or possibly having traveled in the rural areas. Again, a lot of color, very beautiful, and captures the glory of that period very, very beautifully. And this is an image of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, again, very similar in color. You can see his distinguishing features, including his one eye where he was left blind in, some of his jewels, including the Kohinoor, which obviously now is in the possession of the British and has been since this time. So again, a very interesting depiction of how he looked like and how he projected to the British artists, the British colonialists. Next slide, please. And this is again from the period of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. This is a painting of his court. This is again from the early 19th century. The description given here refers to some of his sons who are seated on his left. You can see Ranjit Singh is in the middle on his left. His sons, both of whom ascended to the throne for a very short period of time, Sher Singh and Karak Singh. And on the right, we can't see exactly who the artist would be referring to, but by their physical features, by the images, I think you can reasonably assume we're referring to the ruler of Jammu, Gulab Singh, Dhyan Singh, the Prime Minister under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and various other notable people of that time. The next slide, please. And then the next few slides are really about part of a series of 12 images I have, which are quite interesting in that they have depictions of some of the most interesting characters, people, nobility, royalty of the period from when Maharaja Ranjit Singh was on the throne, and some of the people around him, and then some of those thereafter. So if you look at this one, the first one, you can see it's Maharaja Ranjit Singh on the left and Dhyan Singh on the right. Now, Dhyan Singh was very interesting in that he was the longest-serving prime minister under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, but he subsequently, after the British took over the Punjab, played a very interesting role in the intrigue, in the duplicity, and this is probably one of the sad, tragic periods of Sikh history where the British had taken over the Punjab and the empire was at their mercy, and there was a lot of change, there was a lot of difficulty. It was quite a bad period, and so the next few images actually talk to that period, and you can see some of the interesting characters from there. So this one is quite interesting. This is not any of the notable subjects, but just a depiction of the different kinds of groups that were within the Sikh Empire. You can see a description of a Sikh, a Hindu, a Kashmiri, and a Kabuli woman. As some of you will know, the Sikh Empire extended in various directions, including parts of Tibet, parts of modern-day Afghanistan, through Kashmir, and further to the south. So it's notable that despite Maharaja Ranjit Singh's rule, Sikhs probably accounted for less than 25% of the population of the empire at that time. Next slide, please. And this is again part of that series. This is an image of two of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's sons, well, son and grandson, Raja Karak Singh on the right and Naur Nihal Singh on the left. Again, both of them ascended to the throne one after another, very short-lived. So I think you can assume that all of these were painted around the time where the Sikh Empire had fallen to the British, and a lot of the key players in the intrigue right after Maharaja Ranjit Singh's death were key figures of that time, particularly with the British. and so they're featured in this collection. Next, please. This is an interesting one. On the left is Maharani Jinkaur, who was one of the favorites of Maharaja Ranjit Singh and the mother of Prince Dalip Singh, who eventually ascended to the throne and was taken away to England so that the British could continue to administer and control Punjab in the way they wished. And obviously, Dalip Singh's history and his story is very well written up. Another tragic story of unfulfilled potential. So this is a very interesting image. Next, please. And then the last one is again a very interesting image of two characters who were on different sides of the intrigue after the death of Ranjit Singh. One is Mulraj of Multan, who's on the left, and the other one is Raja Lal Singh. Mulraj of Multan is a very interesting character in that he was a Hindu who ruled Kabul for, not Kabul, Multan, for the Sikh empire under Ranjit Singh. And when Ranjit Singh had passed on, there were still a number of conflicts with the British because they hadn't taken full control of all the kingdoms. And he led a rebellion against the British, a very, very famous rebellion in Multan. And he had Sikhs and he had Pathans, he had various groups fighting alongside him. And that ended with the Second Anglo-Sikh War. But I think from a Singapore perspective, what is particularly interesting about Mulraj of Multan was one of his greatest followers in that conflict was Bhai Maharaj Singh. So those of you who are familiar with the shrine at Silat Road, which we refer to as Silat Road Gurdwara, on the left of that is a shrine to Bhai Maharaj Singh. And it was the conflict under Mulraj of Multan, the gentleman on the left, that brought Bhai Maharaj Singh to the attention of the British and brought them to fear him in the way they did, and eventually bring him to Singapore. And in fact, Mulraj of Multan was a person they also wanted to bring to Singapore to be detained, but that never happened, and he was detained in Bengal and eventually died there. And finally, Lal Singh on the right was a wazir in the Sikh Empire, eventually collaborated with the British over that period of time, and so is another interesting character of that period. The next slide, please. So aside from religious artifacts and some of the paintings and pictures we've just looked at, I've also collected a number of books. And I think the books are particularly interesting because they give you deep insights into what actually happened in that period. And often what we read about, what we hear about is not entirely accurate. And many perspectives, even from British colonialists, others, tell a different story with a lot more detail. So this is a book written by Major Edwards. Major Edwards was actually on the other side of the conflict with Mulraj of Multan, and this is a book he wrote called A Year on the Punjab Frontier. And as you can see, this is one of the images from the book. On the left is Mulraj of Multan, and on the bottom there's a note there which describes him as my ally. And sorry, Mulraj of Multan is on the right, and it says my enemy, and on the left is another gentleman, and that was someone who was collaborating with Edwards, and he's described as my ally. So a very interesting book, as with many other books that tell you a lot more detail about what happened at that time. Next slide, please. And so just to finish off on the collection, aside from religious artifacts, paintings, historical pieces, I've also looked at contemporary Sikh pieces. And this is, again, something that holds a special place in my collection. It's a painting of Guru Gobind Singh Ji by M.F. Hussain. M.F. Hussain is probably the most illustrious contemporary Indian artist. He passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. And he did very little, close to no Sikh pieces. And this is probably one of the few pieces of note, and you'll see this is actually a very beautiful impression of Sri Gobind Singh Ji with a falcon, and in true Hussain style, you've got his trademark horse. You'll also see that he does not paint the feet of his subject, so you can't see the feet of Sri Guru Gobind Singh, you can't see his eyes, and that is trademark Hussain style. So this is again a very different contemporary take on Sikh religious history. And so I think that is it, Simran. I'm happy to take any questions now, or we can do them at the end.
Sure. No, thank you so much, Manraj, for that. We'll probably leave the questions till the end. So if you do have questions on Manraj's collection, or any pieces, or any part on why Manraj started, or more in terms of any particular era of the Sikh history that he has talked about, do feel free to put your questions in the Q&A tab below. We will now move on to our next Sikh collector, Mr. Jaspreet Singh Gurdita, who started the Gurdita collection. And maybe Jaspreet, you can start off also by sharing why did you start, and then move on to your different pieces in your collection. Thank you.
Thank you, Simran Virji, and big thanks to IHC team for allowing me to share my collection. For me, it started off as a young boy. I remember going to Punjabi school and going to Sila Road Gurdwara. And every time when we are at the Gurdwara, we do the Ardas, Raj Karega Khalsa. So I always used to ask my mom and Pitaji, when would Khalsa do the Raj? And they used to tell me stories about how Banda Singh Bahadur, he conquered Sirhind and Maharaja Ranjit Singh Empire, and how we lost it. So that triggered me to read more about our Sikh history, and that started my passion. So when I became in my mid-teens, then my father gave me first coin, which became part of my collection. So that's how I started a collection. So in this picture, on the top, you can see religious tokens. So these tokens, they were minted in gold and silver, and they were given during religious celebrations such as Vaisakhi, Diwali, and the royalties, they minted them in silver and gold, and then they gave out during the weddings. So religious token were not only had pictures of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Mardana and Pai Bala, or Guru Gobind Singh Ji. The other tokens that had influence of Hindu mythology, they had numeric numbers and Om and Trishul. In my collection, I only have all my collection is biased more towards Guruji's. Sikh coins. Coins were minted during the Misal time, and when Maharaja Ranjit Singh he took over as Maharaja of Punjab, they were minted in more than 18 mints at the peak of empire. They were mostly minted in Amritsar, Lahore, Kashmir, Peshawar, and Multan. So how do we know which coin is minted where? So the coins that I just mentioned, the first image at the top, it shows coin minted in 1779. Because of the Indian subcontinent, we use Vikrami Samvat, which is a Hindu calendar. So all the coins, they will have stamped with the year they were minted. So when you look at any of the Sikh Empire coins, the most prominent thing you will see is 4-digit numbers. So from there you can see they were minted in which year. The coin at the top, it shows it was minted during the Misl time, and the coin at the bottom from the Amritsar mint is minted during the Maharaja Ranjit Singh time. As my elder VG Manraj said that during the Maharaja Ranjit Singh Empire, it was the peak of an empire. So Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he brought in people from Multan, from Kashmir, from Peshawar, the best artists. So you can see that even in the coins, there's so much of artistry. You can see their flowers, the leaf motifs, and the calligraphy has improved vastly compared to during the Bangui Misl time. So this coin you see is from Lahore Mint and is from 1784. The first coin was minted by Bangui Misl in 1765. Peshawar. For me as a collector, Peshawar holds a very special place. Hari Singh Nalwa was one of my favorite journals. Grew up listening to his stories. So he ruled Peshawar for 4 years before he passed away in 1837. So as collectors, we only have coins from 4 years, from 1834 to 1837, which can be collected. After Maharaja Ranjit Singh passed away, then subsequently the sons took over and each passed away sadly within a year or two of each other. And the last prince, Maharaja Dalip Singh, ascended the throne in 1843. So from 1843 to 1839 was a very messy affairs of state. So when we look at the coins, in this coin you can see the word Sat, and above the word Sat there's a small umbrella, so which indicates the Maharaja Ranjit Singh was under the protection of Waheguru because he was such a young minor, and his Mataji, Maharani Jind, was always afraid what would happen to him, and eventually he was shipped off to England. As I mentioned earlier, the most common coins of the time were copper coins, and in my collection, I've selected the 5 coins on the left. You can see the first coin on the top left-hand side shows numeric numbers, and then the second coin has a trishul, the third coin has a lotus flower, and the 2 coins at the bottom have dagger. And the coin on the right, you can clearly see the word Akal Sahai. So to me as a young child, when I see a coin that has Gurmukhi and I could read, I found that was very interesting, and always used to ask, why is that even in Punjab today, we don't have coins that are in Gurmukhi. So moving forward to the second part of my collection, which is on British Army. This medal, or this series of medal, is again very close to my heart because it has an image of Sikh soldier standing next to a British officer. The British only commissioned two medals that had Sikh soldiers on it. First was a Punjab medal, which was awarded to British officers who took part in Anglo-Sikh wars, and that medal shows Sikh soldiers surrendering their arms to a British officer. And second medal is the one in my collection. 62 Punjabis. When these mini silk prints were exhibited at the IHC, many people, including Simran VG, asked me that, how come there is this dragon in this on a Punjabi regimental flag? So a lot of us will be wondering, why was there a dragon in Punjab? Actually, it's not that there was a dragon in Punjab. In 1840s, during the first Anglo-Sikh Chinese War, also known as Opium War, the 62 Punjabis regiment took part in the conflict. And because of their bravery, they were authorized to use the golden dragon and the imperial crown as their regimental colors. Sikh pioneers. When we look at Sikh pioneers, they started off as an infantry, and they were raised in 1857, immediately after the Anglo-Sikh War. So a lot of soldiers from Maharaja Ranjit Singh army, they were disbanded. So the British took some of these soldiers and started recruiting them into the Sikh regiments. So this is one of the examples that I have in my collection. And Sikh pioneers, after the independence of India, they were succeeded as Sikh Light Infantry. 14th Sikh Regiment, also commonly known as Ferozpur Sikhs, they were raised in 1846, immediately after the Anglo-Sikh War. So a lot of senior, well-experienced soldiers from the Sikh Empire armies, they joined into this group. So in my collection, I have the Pug badge, which is on the left-hand side, the top. And then second image with the green background is the 14th Sikh, the buttons of officer's shirt and the belt buckle and the shoulder title. And next is a long service medal, which was awarded to Indians only if they complete 24 years of service. And this was awarded in 1903 or 1904. So imagine during that time when there's so much war going on, for a soldier to survive 24 years of combat. So it was a huge achievement at that time. British, they regarded Sikh soldiers as the top of the cream. So they gave out these small cards that had a history of Sikh regiments or Sikh officers. And such example can be seen. This is a small card which shows 4 different officers from various Sikh regiments. And it was given in a packet of cigarettes or cigars to the British officers. And this is another example of a Sikh soldier from the 11th Sikh Regiment. 11th Sikh Regiment came around during the World War II. After the 14, 15, 35, and 47 Sikhs, they were merged together to form the 11th Sikh Regiment. 8th Punjab Regiment. 8th Punjab Regiment was raised in 1903, and they were stationed in Malaya. So during the World War II, and when the Japanese attacked, the 8th Regiment had 2 battalions that fought in Singapore. And if you have a chance to visit Kranji War Memorial, you will be able to see some tombstones that have this insignia of 8th Punjab Regiment on them. It is quite interesting piece, toys. When we talk about Sikh soldiers, we don't much see toys related to Sikhs. So these are lead metal toys made in Germany, and there are 10 of them. 5 of them are from the 14th Sikh Regiment, and 15 are from the 5 of them are from the 15th Sikh Regiment. So each of the soldiers, you can see they're wearing different uniform, and each uniform is very detailed. The way they are carrying the gun, the shoulder belts, and the SBO, and the ammunition packs. These 4 medals belong to my Pitaji's Tayaji. So my father's Tayaji, yeah. And these are the medals that are in our family collection, and they hold a very special place. My dad used to tell me that his Tayaji would share with him the stories on how he fought in Burma, that there were times when they went days without food, and they had to wash hair in the river, and how they were tied the star for each other. I think it's for us boys, because we have served the NS, it's easier for us to relate to such challenges. In my collection, I also collect stamp papers from Sikh princely states. And I have, in this example, you can see from Faridkot Riyasat and from Nabha Riyasat. Not all the paperwork was done in Punjabi. A lot was still carried out in Persian or Urdu. till the independence of India. At the start of 1901 and till 1903, Jaspreet settlement, they decided to launch a series of postcards. There were 138 of them, and from them, in my collection, I have 2 of these postcards, which shows Sikh police officers. You can see the image on the right is a very young man, probably in his 17 or 18 years old, and there's the officer that is on the left hand side is probably his mid 30s. So from here we can see that young boys as young as 17 years old were recruited into the army and in police force. This jug is from my family collection, and it looks quite ordinary, but it's quite heavy. It's almost about 2.5 to 3 kilo, and Dadiji will tell a story how she had to every time scrub it to make sure it's shining and is kept properly. Yeah. And during the early 60s and 50s, a lot of Punjabi houses will have these kangani grasses. If you had opportunity to go to Punjab during those days, you'll be served lassi and dodh and chai in these huge glasses. So like probably about half a liter of lassi in this glass. This picture is a grandparents' picture when they arrived in Singapore in 1952, and it was taken. Dadaji came during 47 after the independence of India to find better opportunities in Malaya, and then ended up in Singapore. And after staying here for 4 years, in 1951, he traveled back to Punjab to get married. And then Dadiji came over in 52. And 10 years later, you can see the eldest Tayaji, the young boy with a tie, and second Tayaji, dad, and the youngest of Chachas. So in this picture, you don't see 4 boys, you see it's 3 boys and 1 girl. The reason is at that time, Dad used to say that many of the people would say, "What is this Chief Singh is so lucky he got 4 sons." So to avoid buri nazar, they used to dress up the younger son Chachaji as a girl. And this tiffin belongs to Dadaji. When he used to go to work, he would pack his lunch in it. So this is part of the family collection, and I'm happy to share with you guys. That's all from my side. Back to Simran Virji.
Thank you so much, Jaspreet. That was a really interesting journey, and you actually already took a lot of my questions and answered them ahead of time. You already knew what I was going to ask you, but it was a very interesting collection. I mean, I think a lot of what you have is priceless in terms of some of the elements of the Sikh military artifacts, and so I think some of that will be very interesting for some of the participants today as well. So if you have any questions for Jaspreet, I've already seen 1 or 2 questions that are coming into the Q&A tab. Do put your questions into the Q&A tab. You can type your questions there, and we will address them at the end of the session, end of the presentations. So thank you so much, Jaspreet. We'll move on to the next Jaspreet Singh Narula, who will talk to us and share with us his pieces, and very interestingly also talk about the different aspects. I mean, we've already gone through the journey of the religious artifacts. We've gone through the Sikh Empire. We've gone through the military services. Now we will talk and see pieces a little bit more contemporary, but talking about family histories, talking about the business aspects, and also the contributions of Sikhs beyond just the military services. So over to you, Jaspreet.
Thank you, Simran Vijay. Sat Sri Akal ji, and good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank IHC for inviting me to speak at this webinar. I feel truly blessed and humbled. The Sikh exhibition at the IHC is truly amazing, and I recommend everyone to go and view all these pieces of art and history. For me personally, I started taking an interest in history during my secondary school times, and I immediately fell in love. And as I grew older, I started to get to know a lot more about my own family history. And till today, I still learn new things as I go, and I keep hearing beautiful stories from everyone. And I think personally, I think it's very important, as you know, the older generation are slowly leaving, disappearing, and I think it's so important to know our foundations, our roots, and you know where we come from. From that, I will be talking about my maternal and paternal side. So my maternal side is from the Gyan Singh and Company family, and my paternal side is from the Indusans and Company family. I'll start with my maternal side. So my maternal side comes from Gyan Singh and Company, which comprised of 4 brothers. Starting with the eldest is Uncle Hardyal Singh Bajaj, followed by Uncle Inder Singh Bajaj, followed by my grandfather, my Nanaji, Hira Singh Bajaj, and the youngest Uncle Balwant Singh Bajaj. The brothers came from India to KL and Ipoh, if I'm not wrong. And then from there, they came to Singapore in the early 30s, and they set up Gyan Singh and Company. So Gyan Singh and Company was basically a departmental store, and it was basically an older Mustafa, if I may. So they were in direct competition with the likes of Robinsons, John Little, White Aways, and many more. Majority of the items, from my collection have been handed down to me from my grandmother to my mother, and then eventually to me. And the other items have been found along the way and purchased. So from the first slide, so this is the first Gyan Singh and Company store. So this is at actually 4 Battery Road. This is actually the Bank of China building, which is also the Bank of China building is still there. And so the brothers, they used to rent out this place. And to my knowledge, from what I've been told, is that the first 2 stories were the shops, and the 3rd story was the residence where the family used to live. And yeah, so it was literally in the heart of Singapore CBD area. And then if you see on the photo on the right, the company still actually was in operation during the war, before the war, during the war, and even after the war. So this is actually a very special photo that was found on the internet, where you can clearly see the Japanese Imperial Army marching through from Raffles Place and all the way towards Fullerton Square. And you can clearly see the Gyan Singh and Company building on the right. And yeah, I mean, to me, this was a very powerful photo of a very difficult time for Singapore, but yet a lot of businesses, still carried on, continued. So this, the image on the left is my grandfather, my Nanaji Hira Singh Bajaj, during a trip to Shanghai. And on the image on the right is the same trip, instead that he's actually standing at the far left. And he went to Shanghai with his eldest brother, Uncle Hardyal Singh Bajaj, who's seated in the front row. And yeah, this trip was primarily just for business and to meet other suppliers and establish good relationships. So after the war, the store at the Battery Road was still there, but the bank wanted the premise back to redevelop, and after the war, Singapore was in a transition to redevelop and bring itself back to where it was. So with that, the brothers decided that, let's, instead of renting, let's purchase our own store. So that's exactly what they did. So in this photo, this is actually a very old photograph of Raffles Place. And you can clearly see on the right, the first building is John Little. And then the 3rd building is Bajaj Textiles, which was owned by Uncle Inder Singh Bajaj, followed by the building next to it, which is Gyan Singh and Company. So these two buildings were owned by the brothers, and from there it was much better because the buildings were owned. We didn't have to worry so much about it being taken back, and it was done very nicely, and it was proper colonial buildings, and it was a very nice atmosphere. A fun fact about this image is that I also realized was that if you look at the John Little building, where our MRT is right now, the MRT to go underground, you'll notice that the facade of the MRT is actually the roof design of the John Little building. So that's a little fun fact. Next slide, please. So these are items that were given away, given to customers as they shopped, those who spend a certain amount, and also those who just bought random things. One of the items is this diary, and the other is this ashtray, and they gave a lot of items like this, like even like silk scarves, books, a lot of items. And so for me, one of my favorites is the diary, because it has this image of the store at the front, and it's dated all the way back to 1949. So it holds a very special place in my heart. Next slide, please. So the first image on the left is an advertisement by the company. So they were very, I would say the brothers were very entrepreneurial. They always advertise in almost every day of the papers. You will see big articles, small articles, medium-sized articles, and they would just market themselves. They would market, everything. They would market products. They would market clothes, textiles, and everything, even food. So the image on the right is actually, we also used to deal in films. So the store was in competition with the likes of Cathay, Shaw Brothers. And so these were advertisements of films, mainly Hindustani films. Next slide, please. So this is a receipt that I had from what was passed down to me by my grandmother. It's a very intricate design of the receipt. Even when you look at the design of the receipt, you wonder, like, is this really from 1951? Because the printing is so well done, and yeah, it is truly remarkable. Next slide, please. So this is a letter. So this letter has a very very interesting story. I was with my mom, and we had gone to what's called a flea market, and at the flea market, there was this guy who had laid out a table and put all sorts of documents, pictures, photos, old maps and things like that on display. So I was just randomly looking at the table, and all of a sudden I recognized the letterhead, and I saw I just saw Gyan Singh, and my mom was on the other side looking at something else, and I took it out, and I saw that this was a letter that was written, I think, if I'm not wrong, to Chennai, and it was signed by my grandfather, Hira Singh Bajaj, my Nanaji, and my emotions just exploded. I was shocked, and I was, bewildered, and I got my mom's attention, and we immediately purchased it from this seller, and it was truly something else. And I had asked him, do you have any more? And he said, no, only this one piece. And it was truly remarkable. Yeah, so this letter is really truly something. I mean, obviously we have a lot more letters like with the Gyan Singh letterheads like this, but this was truly a really rare find for me. Next slide, please. So this is it's a flyer announcing the Hardyal Singh and Sons grand annual sale, and actually it actually opens up, and in the flyer there's a list of everything from fabrics to leathers to watches to electronics, things like that. As you know, at that time we did not have the means of technology. There was no such thing as internet, no such thing as WhatsApp. We couldn't really, market themselves. They couldn't really market themselves. But you have to hand it to each and every one of the brothers. Like they were so entrepreneurial. They actually really knew how to market the company, how to market their sales, how to take advantage of advertisement, and that, to me, is truly something that I too still need to learn. Next slide, please. So this is also just a letterhead of Bajaj Textiles. It's just a plain letterhead, but once again, if you really, so this item is on loan at the IHC Sikh exhibition. If you get a chance, if you really look at the letterhead, you'll see that the printing is so detailed of the store that it's truly remarkable. And you wonder, like, wow, this is really done in the 40s and the 50s. This is amazing. So next slide, please. So these are tea sets belonging to my Nanaji. So he got them done. He had actually had a few collections done with his initials, Hira Singh or HS Bajaj, hand painted on each and every one of these fine chinas. So we have like a lot, and most of them, majority, I would say 95% of them were all made in Japan, and they were all handmade, and they're so delicate, but we still use them. I'm not gonna lie, we use them for tea because you know what, it's such a shame to just leave them in the cupboard. And yeah, we use them for tea and entertaining family members and things like that. And it's very nice to have them out when other family members come in and it's just, we reminisce. Yes, next slide, please. So this is also something else that my Nanaji had made. These are actually just a tray and a few glasses that are all made in sterling silver that have his name at the bottom of the cup, which reads in Punjabi, Shri Hira Singh Bajaj. So this is also a very special piece to me. We don't we don't use this, but we just have it on as a display in a certain part of the house. Next slide, please. So from that, I'm going to conclude my maternal side of Gyan Singh and Company. And I will move on to my paternal side, which is In the Sons and Company. So In the Sons and Company was started by my great-grandfather, Sadul Singh Narula, who came from Bangkok, Thailand to Singapore in the late 30s. In the Sons and Co was a wholesale textile merchant that dealt in all types of textiles from silk, cotton, leather, and many more. So the first shop was actually in High Street. And then from there, they moved to 88, the first shop was actually in Arab Street. And then from there, they moved to 88 High Street, which is currently the Treasury building. And in this slide, you can see the image on the left is my great-grandfather, Sadul Singh, and my great-grandmother. And on the image on the right is the entire Narula family of In the Sons and Company. And my grandparents are standing in the middle. And the young boy seated next to my great-grandfather is actually my father. So this is really a very, very nice photo, which was probably taken in the early 60s, if I'm not wrong. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview of my great-grandfather. He was a very influential person. He was very well known in the Sikh community as well as the British community. He was very well known in the British government as well as the royal household, as they used to invite him for many gala events at that time. This Dana was called the government house, if I'm not wrong. So they always used to have garden parties. So he was always at the opening ceremonies and things like that. He was also chairman of the Sikh Advisory Board, as well as president of the Kapung Dwara for a short time. So in this photo, the first image on the left is my great-grandfather at the opening of Pardesi Khalsa at Kirk Terrace. And he was one of the guests of honors, followed by the main guest of honor, which was Commissioner General Mr. Malcolm MacDonald. And in the image on the right, you can see that they are both in the Darbar Sahib paying their respects to Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And yeah, this was truly a big moment for the Sikh community to have a Gurdwara opened. And yeah, next slide, please. So as I said, my great-grandfather was always invited to many events and always was one of the guests of honors. And so the image on the left, you can clearly see him standing, and he is this. If I'm not wrong, from what I was told, this was at the Padang. It was a cricket match, and he was presenting the prizes to the teams and the officials and things like that. And the image on the right is actually a photo of him seated next to our former Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, in the Gurdwara here in Singapore. And yes, next slide, please. So this is actually a newspaper article that published the wedding of my grandfather and Jodh Singh Narula as well, with my grandmother, Avtar Kaur. And the wedding was actually had taken place in Bangkok, Thailand in 1956. So followed with that, the wedding party came back to Singapore, and the party had continued at my great-grandfather's residence at 779 Mountbatten Road. So this was also another really nice article that made my grandmother very proud. Actually, she did not even know this article was even published until just, I think, 2 years ago, when we found this article and we showed it to her. And yeah, unfortunately, my grandfather had passed away recently, so he did not get to see the article, or maybe he did, in his younger days. I'm not so sure, but yeah, it's really a nice article for them. Next slide, please. These are other images of my great-grandfather, always being invited to give speeches at events and things like that. So these are one of the few photos at the photo on the right, he was at the National Theatre Trust and things like that. Next slide, please. So this is a very special photo that I had just found recently in my own house, and I think it was just lying in a file, just untouched for, I don't know, over 20 years, I would say. And so this is a photo of my great-grandfather standing next to our former president, Mr. Deva Nair. Yeah, next slide, please. So along with that photo came these, one of many invitations that were found. I so happened to just be looking for something in one of the rooms, and I noticed a drawer was slightly open. So I opened it and I saw like just files and files stacked upon each other. And I just opened them, and you could tell that they were very old files, because you could see like rusted paper clips and paper clip marks and staple marks and things like that. So you could really tell they were really old. So, and they need a little bit of dusting. So I opened them, and from there it came like an enormous amount of invites from the British royal family to my great-grandfather to attend ceremonies, to meet His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, as well as to attend garden parties to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday, to meet our former Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, our former President, Mr. Yusof Ishak, and many other, there were so many invites and things like that. So one of the items was that photo previously in the previous slide, and these invites. And yeah, next slide, please. Another one, another significant find with these letters. These were letters during when my great-grandfather was president of the Katong Gurdwara, as well as chairman of the Sikh Advisory Board. So this was when Katong Gurdwara was just newly developed, and they wanted to promote the Gurdwara and also promote Sikhism in Singapore. So with that, they got they wanted to get Guru Gobind Singh Ji's relics to be flown over to Singapore to be displayed for everyone in the society, as well as the entire country to come and see. And these are letters from addressed to the Maharani of Naba as the guest of honor who was visiting who would come to visit the relics, as well as view the Gurdwara at the opening. Next slide, please. So lastly, yes, these are also documents pertaining to the Guru Nanak Satsang Sabha and the Maharani of Naba and the display of Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji's relics. And yeah, this was all overlooked by my great-grandfather. And yeah, this is one of the one of the finds that that happened in my own house. So yeah, all these documents, images, items all have a very special place in my heart personally, and I'm very honored to share them with everyone here. Thank you so much. And back to you, Simranji. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaspreet. That was very, very interesting, and it gave us a great glimpse of your family history and a lot of the achievements also. It makes as a young collector, I can imagine how proud and immensely proud you are looking at all those items as well. So if you have a question, do put it into the chat. I have a couple already. If you have a comment as well, do put it into the chat. I would like to invite all the panelists to turn on their videos, and maybe I'll start the ball rolling with a couple of questions, and then as more questions come in, we will address them as we go along as well. So I think the first one would be, and sometimes it's very difficult. It's a simple question, but it's very difficult to answer. You've all shown us your entire collection, and many amazing pieces. So if I were to ask you which are your favorite pieces, going through your individual collection, maybe we start with Manraj and then move on to Jaspreet Singh Gurdita and then Jaspreet Singh Narula, and to just share which are your pieces that are your favorite, and why. How is it meaningful to you?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's very difficult to pick a favorite. They're all very different pieces that tell different stories at different times. If you ask me, I guess the maps, I think I find fascinating, because it's very difficult to look on the screen, but if you look at the detail of the map, it tells a fascinating story. The English map, which we didn't spend too much time on, I think if anyone was to look at the map today very closely, you could literally pick out all the small towns in Punjab that everybody's familiar with, that your families originated from. So there's a lot of detail there, and obviously that's a snapshot of time. I think the French map is special because it was the start of a very interesting period, which is difficult to find. And I guess lastly, the ivory carving of the Golden Temple in the brass piece, I think it's a visually very striking piece. So those would be the ones that stand out for me.
Thanks, Manraj. Jaspreet Singh Gurdita first, maybe, and then Jaspreet Singh Narula.
Vijay, for me is quite difficult as what Vijay Manraj said, because we are collectors. When we are collecting them, each piece has an interesting story. So it's like you're asking me to choose which of the children is my favorite. Yeah, but among the coins, the coins in Gurumukhi do hold a very special place to me, because the word Guru Nanak, Akal Sahai, they relate to each and every one of us in our daily lives. And when we look at regimental, army regimental is very hard to pick any one of them. So the oldest one in my collection, the one that has a Sikh soldier, it holds a very special place, because there's no other series of medal that has a Sikh soldier to it. To me, as a young collector, when I had it in my collection, I was like 25 years old. So I was like, felt like in heaven, like, it's me who is in that medal, that kind of feeling that you get. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. No, I saw your eyes light up again. You were reminiscing that moment of seeing that medal as well. So that's very nice.
Yeah.
Jaspreet Singh, Narula?
Well, like the rest have said, it's very difficult to choose personally. But if I would have to choose, I would definitely say for me are the photos of my grandfather, and as well as my great-grandfather from my paternal side. Because especially my maternal side, because my grandfather, my Nanaji, passed away at a very young age. He passed away when he was in his 40s. So my mother was just 3 years old, and she did not even get to meet her father. So after that, I mean, even at that time, there was not much photography taken. Now we take out our phone just to take photographs of like, ants crawling on the floor. But at that time, it was very hard to take photographs, and also, it's very, so for me, those, I think the most special ones are the photographs and the letters. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for that. There are a couple of questions in the chat. So let me ask them. Some of them are directed to individuals. So first one, I think, is for you, Manraj. And this comes from Gurnihal. He's got a couple of questions. So the first question is, what is your approach when it comes to collecting? And do you have a particular period or type of piece that you search along the line and put that in part of your collection?
Yeah, interesting question. The short answer is no. I think, as I said before, the truth is there are very few pieces out there because of the very short period of the Sikh Empire, and when Maharaja Ranjit Singh could focus on the more artistic aspects of empire. And then if you look back in history, the religious period, again, a lot of the time was spent in defending the faith. So it's a very short period of time. There's not a lot of things around, and they were therefore not collected well. I started collecting about 15 years ago in the UK, and at that time there was not a lot of interest in Sikh artifacts, Sikh art. That has changed. There are definitely a lot more collectors around the world. If you go to any of the auctions, you will see a lot more interest, and you will see some of the prices achieved for notable Sikh pieces way above what even the auctioneers expected. I think recently there was jewelry that belonged to Maharani Jind Kaur that was a significant, that raised a significant sum. A few years ago, there was a rifle, a shotgun actually, that belonged to Prince Dalip Singh, and he actually commissioned the shotgun for one of his sons, who, by the way, both of whom were excellent shots and held records in England for the amount of shooting they did in game hunting and so on. So there are a lot of interesting pieces out there, and I think, as I said before, what I try and focus on is something that's visually appealing, but also it tells me a story of significance that I think is difficult to capture otherwise.
Sure. No, thanks for that, Manraj. One of your pieces, just that intrigued me actually, as you were explaining it, was on that picture with the court of Maharaja Ranjit Singh and all the prominent ministers that were there. It's very interesting, and you're right. The pieces tell a story, and you look at the different prominent ministers itself. You could see it was already a very multi-faith court with different faith groups, very circular, very diverse, and I think that was a call of leadership that was taken by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, where strength in diversity was an important part of that court.
Yeah, you're right, and it's often forgotten when you think about it. When he built that empire, he was very clear that it was secular. He encouraged people of other communities to preserve their own faith. He contributed funds to mosques, to Hindu temples, and so on. And there were people in his court who were Hindus, who were Muslim. And as you point out, he brought in generals from Europe to modernize. The one group he did not bring in generals from were the British. He brought in French, he brought in Italians, he brought in Russians, he brought in Americans. So he recognized that, and obviously that, looking back even today, that was visionary, and which was why the methods they had, the equipment they had, meant that they were very difficult to penetrate, and ultimately that was the last part of India to fall to the British. So there's a lot of stories in there, and I have elsewhere lithographs of some of the French generals, Allard and so on. And when you look at what they did, how they adopted Sikh dress, some of them wore turbans. It was fascinating what he achieved in that kingdom in a short period of time.
Yeah, no, fair point on that one. There's a question by Gurnihal to Jaspreet as well. Jaspreet Singh Gurdita. So his question to you is, you have a very niche collection with coins that you have. So throughout your collecting journey, you must have come across a collective of individuals with same interests, probably around the world. So how is this community being built of other collectors with similar interests? And also, how have this community supported you in your journey of collection?
Okay, for me, when I started collecting after having my first coin, I started to do research on internet, and one of the only places that we could find these Sikh Empire coins were auction houses in UK. So auction houses like Baldwin Auction and Worth Coin and few other, and over the years, in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of Facebook groups have been created where collectors, they share their coins and the information. So from this group, I met these two individuals. One is Narendra Pal Singh, he's from Ludhiana, and this guy, in his own words, he's so crazy that he has ever put his house for sale just to grab some coins. So there are individuals out there who have such blind passion for Sikh history, and they know that they must do their share to preserve it. So it's from people like him and other individuals that inspire me to take up this king's hobby. That is his words, is a king's hobby. Yeah, because it's an endless speed. Like, for example, if I started off collecting Amritsar coins first, and then I got poisoned. Do you want to have a look at the Lahore coin? And then you see so beautiful. And then you see Peshawar series. Then you go to Kashmir, and then you go to Multan, and it goes on and on. Yeah.
So I know Narendra Pal Biji as well, and you are absolutely right. He's created now he's created an entire museum in his house.
Yes, correct.
So he stays in one room, and the rest of his house is a museum.
Museum, yes, correct.
That's passion for you. There's another you mentioned about coins, and there's another question relating to coins. So by Ma Son Yuhu, and she asked about the leaf motifs, and what is the significance of some of the leaf motifs that are on these coins?
Okay, for almost all the Sikh coins, let it be in copper, silver, or gold, there definitely will be a leaf motif on it. So various experts, they have their own opinions on it. Some say it's a people, some say it's berry, but almost everybody has come to common consensus is that because the coins are dedicated to Guruji, so the leaf symbolizes nature, Mother Nature. And also because our Punjab community was more of a farming community, is to symbolize that as well. Yeah. So it's more to give respect to nature. Yeah.
Thanks for that. There's another question here, and I think this is for you, Jaspreet Singh Narula. So I think people want to know the origin. So how did the name Gyan Singh come about? And co, because they were all brothers with different names, and I had a similar question: how did In the Sons come about? And because they had a different name as well, so it'll be good to understand that too.
So for Gyan Singh and Company, the name came from one of their uncles, and yeah. So yeah, that was just to cut short. It was just named from one of their uncles, who was very well respected and everything. So they brought his name in. And as for the In the Sons and Co, actually, so that has a deeper history. So for In the Sons and Co, actually, my grandfather, actually, our Narula family comes from the BSIS family in Bangkok. So that's called Bur Singh Inder Singh. So Bur Singh is my great grandfather, followed by his son Inder Singh, and then followed by his son Sardul Singh. So it just keeps on, moving. So from Bur Singh, he had Inder Singh, and Inder Singh had Sardul Singh. So Sardul Singh paid homage to his father by naming the company Inder Sons and Company.
Interesting. Very nice. Very nice. There's if you have more questions, do feel free to put it in the chat. And I think a lot of people are commenting on the chat as well on the richness of these collections that you have. So and very much impressed by your collections as well. I have another question for all of you, and I wanted to understand. All of you collected parts of family memorabilia and documents and to try and keep and preserve that. In your mind, how important is this for the community and also for new collectors? Is this the start point, that you start with collecting stuff or understanding or getting a deeper understanding of your own family and then moving on to other collections? Is this a good start point? I just wanted to get your comments and your thoughts on this. Maybe Manraj, you want to start with?
Sure, yeah. I didn't touch on it because it's not been a focus area, but I think what Jaspreet Singh Narula has done with his family collection is fantastic and formidable. I think a lot of people in the community do not realize that they are in possession of some very interesting, valuable items, not valuable in a monetary sense, but valuable in terms of history and story and explaining a lot of questions to the younger members of the community. And we've seen that with this exhibition. And I think it's important. One possession I have, which is kept very safely, which is not part of the exhibition, is the passport of my paternal grandfather, which was issued in the Punjab in 1918. And it's a very interesting document. It's the way it's laid out, the way it's constructed. But when I look at that, it continues to amaze me, the journey all of them went on, right? And we talk about travel today very simply, but for a lot of them, for all of them, the journey they went on to move to different parts of the world, this part of the world was huge. And the document clearly shows who it was signed by. It was signed by the collector, in Punjab, and it was renewed by the collector in Madras when he was making his way to this part of the world. And the journey they went on, what they endured, the beginning of a very humble journey brings us to where we are today. So I think like a lot of what's being shown at the exhibition, there's some amazing stories that need to be shared, need to be told, that we haven't done enough of. So again, wonderful work by the IHC to put this together.
Thanks for that, Manraj. And in fact, I mean, if I were to say, you and I connected because of a picture of your dad, which was serendipitously put into the film that we had on Bhai Manraj Singh, and your dad was a police officer that was in charge of the move of the memorial to Sila Road Gurdwara, where it is in the 1960s. So, our connection occurred from a piece of history as well.
Exactly, and that is a fascinating image, because, as you say, that was an important journey for the memorial to move down to its current site. And as luck would have it, my father was asked to supervise that for the police, from the police point of view. And on that same evening, my brother was born. And a number of ladies in the community encouraged my father to name my brother after Bhai Manraj, which he did not do. But anyway, that was the image which you write, which is in your fantastic production of on Bhai Manraj Singh.
Jaspreet Singh Gurjata, in terms of family collection, I know you had really interesting jugs and the big lassi glass, which I really like, which I will try to get off your collection because I really like that one. But do you think collecting family memorabilia is a good start point and one to encourage more for the community so that we can build this even further?
Yes, I totally agree. I remember having discussion with Narula from IHC. I told her that in my family collection, I have this no gauge dakagra from 1940s that belongs to my great grandmother, and the skirt has 7 layers of kapra. So it's such fine kapra with embroidery. So that is one of the things. And back home in Punjab, we have a gun that belongs to 4th generation grandfather, means a gun that is made in Belgium from 1931. So one of the court paper from Faridkot Riyasat in Punjabi, it has the rifle number that matches that rifle.
Wow.
Yeah. So to me, importantly, you must preserve your own family history first, and then you understand who you are, and that would strengthen you as a person. And then you can move to your neighbor and community. You cannot just simply jump and say, I start my collection without understanding yourself.
Yeah. No, fair point on that one. I mean, I think you rightly pointed out, you have to be able to start valuing the materials that you have in the family itself, because they tell a story, and that story needs to be preserved, and the next generation will not know the story if they're not preserved well enough. Another interesting one that was in your collection that I really liked was the toys. And you don't see that very often, so that's a very unique collection itself. Are there others that have been made? Have you seen other toys like that have been created? Because it reminds me of like when I was in school days and having all those army shoulders that you put together, and the plastic ones, and these are like metal ones that have been made with the Sikh soldiers.
Correct. There are collectors out there who have figure cuts out of Sikh soldiers, or more so, they come in a pack of, I think, 10 in a set. Like they have a Gurkha, a Madrasi, and a Sikh, and a Musalman. Yeah, but they are from 40s. Like if you travel back slightly in 1890s or 1910, most of the toys were made from lead, and they are very rare, but each one is so unique, as if like each one is a copy image of an individual soldier. Yeah.
And you have all 10 of them?
Yeah, in my collection, I have 10 of them. I know of individuals who have like 50 of them.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
So some are small fry compared to there are a lot of other big collectors out there. Yeah. And one thing, Vijay, I would like to share with you, the first time when I displayed this coin was in 2012 during the Manraj Darbar. And I was a bit worried, nervous, as I'm still now today, and how would public react to it? And will I make a mockery out of myself? Maybe people will ask me something I would not know how to answer, but it went very well. And I recall these two babies clearly. They came up to me and they said in Punjabi, "Potter, inni kimti cheez si," like this item was so precious, I didn't knew. She told me that she was like 8 or 9 years old before the partition of India and Pakistan, and she remember her mom had a jug full of such coins, and they had to sell them to make ends meet.
Wow.
Yeah, so the same story can be related to a lot of us who live in Singapore during the kampong days. They may have some memorabilia, but due to space constraint or due to difficulties, these treasures would have been lost downstream.
Yeah.
So Jaspreet Singh, Narula Virji, you're very lucky that you're able to find such letters. Yeah.
That was a blessing find. Yeah, that was an interesting find, Jaspreet. I was going to comment about that one as well. I mean, I mean, your emotions must have really. I can't even imagine coming out across that randomly as and being able to look at that. But did at that point in time were you already collecting? That was my question. Or did that spark the interest to collect further?
I wouldn't say I was collecting. I was just finding things in my house. I was asking my other family members because different families have different sets of photographs. So we were all sharing, and as we were sharing with each other. We found different photographs. We found a lot of many magical things, and one of these items just happened to be one of these letters at this flea market. And I think the most shocked person actually was my mother, because it was a letter that was signed by her father, who she unfortunately did not have the chance to meet. So for her, I think she was over the moon, and it was really truly something else. And yeah. But just like every other item that I have, that most of the items have been passed down from my grandmother to my mother to me. And the other items I've found along the way and purchased. Yeah, it's a growing collection, I think, but it's like a personal collection. It's not really, something that I would think to like display, or until the IHC had actually approached me and, and told me, okay, I think it's a good idea. And I was like, okay, yeah, I think, yeah, okay, let's do this. Let's see how this goes. And with that, yeah, it started to become bigger. And as the IHC was loaning the items, I found more items in other rooms and things like that. Yeah. So, but a big thanks to my my nanny, who actually kept these items, because if it weren't for her, these items would have just been lost over time. And I know a lot of other family members who have also very big, rich family histories, and due to time, due to space constraints, and families moving and things like that, things get lost along the way. And we're living in a country like Singapore, where the weather is not on our side. We get humidity, we get silverfish that eat on the documents and things. So all these items are very precious, and yes.
So you did a fantastic job to bring that together, because even on the chat you have people saying that they remember and have old memories of Gyan Singh and Co. And Hira Singh and Hardyal Singh Bajaj. So you have rekindled their memory of the Mustafa, the original Mustafa.
No, I wouldn't say that.
as you put it just now.
No. But yeah, but all credit goes to literally all the brothers, and I like from what your question was, I think it's very important for the younger generation to know your family background, know who the foundations were, what they had to do to sacrifice, what they sacrificed to come to Singapore, how they had to work, earn money, and it wasn't easy. Nothing in life is easy, but some prevailed, and it's truly something that the younger generation should get to know. And like I said earlier, the older generations are slowly disappearing, and this is a time where we need to actually ask them for stories, not say stories, but life lessons, as well as what happened as they were growing up, because all these you won't ever get to hear from anyone else. And as my nani used to always tell me was that everything else, family is always first. She always used to say Parvar Pehla. That was her main thing. She with her, she kept the family very well together, and that's how we are today. We're a very close family, and we like to share our items. Yeah, so
very nice.
So much.
Very nice. So thank you guys, all of you, for a very enriching session. I learned tremendously from this session itself. There's one other question here, and I will probably pose this to Nalina from IHC. And this is a question by Wai Wong, Woon Wai Wong. And the question is, the Sikhs in Singapore exhibition offers an opportunity to see these privately collected beautiful items. After this exhibition, we might not have the opportunity anymore. So Nalina, what do we do? How do we help to preserve these collections and be able to keep them alive? And so I pose this question to you, and I'm being a little bit cheeky as well. I know you've done a great job and a lot of hard work to try and bring all of this together. If not for your efforts, we wouldn't have been able to see it in the first place. So a big thank you to you and your team at IHC. But what do we do for those who want to see it after this?
Simran, you're not being only cheeky, you're also trying to put me on the spot. And I'm going to respond by saying that I think amongst all of us gathered here, you actually have been really championing the cause of making sure that this story that we've put together that hasn't been told before does not fizzle away with its physical existence, that there is something that continues beyond the lifespan of the exhibition. So we are in the process of digitizing the exhibition. It will transfer to the virtual world where we will be archiving it for posterity. And with the support of generous collectors and of course the community, we are hoping to build our own collection as well. I think I must first, before I move on to what I want to say as well, I think I want to thank the collectors and of course Simran for your time, because I think this is but one small amount of your time that you've set aside for us. And it speaks so much of your generosity and absolute passion for your identity and culture that you responded to our call. I mean, with Manraj, it was Simran linking me up, and then we sort of connected over the phone, and it was immediately, yes, please come and see what I have. And I think with Jaspreet, I must say that he's been very modest throughout the whole session. And I must share with all of you how I first met Jaspreet. So Jaspreet actually is quite a hound when it comes to finding things to do with his family. He came to our doorstep because we had one of those very elusive silk scarves that Gyan Singh and Co had given out to its clientele. And it had come to us from a member of the Bori Muslim community who loaned it to us at that time and has since donated it. And he came to see the scarf, and he was so moved that he felt that, he'd like to share his collection with us. And, it really sort of, the journey started off from there. And I think Jaspreet is still on the lookout for one of those scarves. But Jaspreet, I'm going to say that that's going to be like the umbilical cord that keeps you connected with. I think it's going to make you want to keep coming back. And with Jaspreet and Gurdita, I think it was really interesting because for this exhibition, like many of our others, we did that we collaborate with the community. We launched a collection drive. So Jaspreet actually responded when he saw the collection drive poster, and he came forward saying, hey, I actually have something I can contribute to this exhibition. So, I think this webinar's participants really, show us the 3 different profiles that we featured, apart from the pioneers that we featured in the exhibition as well, collectors, because I think IHC is a very young museum, and we fully well acknowledge that the custodian of Singapore's Indian heritage is still the community. They're the larger custodian, and we are but the young baby around the corner, but we're really trying to see how we can help, to sort of comprehensively present an overarching Indian narrative. So we're really grateful to all of you for making the time to share with us your stories, how you've actually been doggedly pursuing your interest in bringing together these collections. I know that many of these have come to you not at one shot, but over years. So it's really that we have benefited from your years of research, your years of interest and passion, because you've been so generous with what you've shared with us. And the exhibition really came together, showcasing both Sikh art in the Indian subcontinent, because we felt that was a very important starting point for the narrative before we sort of went into Sikh history in Singapore. So thank you so much for sharing this narrative during the webinar, and Simran really for also suggesting we put the structure in so people understand how we are sort of proceeding through the webinar. And yes, and with that, I'd like to sort of conclude by saying the exhibition is now extended and will be closing on the 30th of January, 2022. So you have no excuse to not have visited it. Please come down and visit it. And as you've heard from many participants, especially Woodwide, it's a wonderful exhibition, so don't miss it. Come and see it when it's still around, yeah? And of course, after that, you can research it by going online to see more about it. Thank you so much. And with that, we wish all of you a wonderful weekend, and goodbye.